Right, hi, I'm gonna do a side-by-side test of Relief Maker and ZBrush to see how they compare taking a model, a 3D model, and projecting it into a relief. What I've got here is it's a head. It's a kind of a, it's not particularly great head. It's just something I was mucking around with a while back. But it's high poly. It's about 7 million polygons, and I've just exported that from ZBrush as it is without anything else. So it'll make a decent sort of test. So what I've done is I'm lining it up face on. I've got the same thing in ZBrush. I've put the I've got a bit of a sort of perspective on it because we've got a focal length here. So I've done the same in ZBrush. So I've put the perspective on. I tend to usually work with it off just because it distorts stuff, but we're just trying to try and get some parity here. So they look, they're in more or less the same place on the canvas. For Relief Maker, I've kept the relief a little higher, the height scale a little higher for this because I just want to see what it does, and I think as I go lower, what I'm finding is that some of the very fine detail sort of starts to disappear, and it's, you know, just to get a sort of decent stab at what the model's actually going to look like when it's compressed. I thought I'd leave that a bit high, and also with ZBrush's project relief, there's no real way of controlling how high it's going to come out. It very much does its own thing. So we'll see anyway. Right, so we're set up, ready to go with ZBrush. So I'm just going to hit, I've put a relief repeat count. I've kept it quite high res, so about 4,000 on the scale, the quality scale. Let's just say quality, niceness, the niceness scale. I'm just going to project that and see what it does. Just having to think about it. Okay, there we go. Right, so we'll turn this model off. Okay, so as I usually expect with ZBrush's relief, we've got quite a high set edge. I mean, you can see it more clearly on the back of the, I've left the back face masking off so we can see what it does. You can see there's quite a high set edge to this, which is fine. It's a bit of a pain in the bum because it's got to be, it means that if I'm, you know, you so much of the actual relief height is being taken up by this huge cliff, and there's some jaggediness, there's some chattering around the edge of that, which is also pretty much par for the course. I mean, it's there. Oh, it's doing the, like I said last time, that's a really good example of ZBrush thinking like somebody who's learning how to model. You can see there that the face is actually dipping in to give the nose room to come out, which is a bit of a, you're a rookie, ZBrush, you're a rookie. The weirdest thing is it's put this crease right up the middle with this face on portrait. You can see it goes up through the neck. You can just kind of see it on the chin and then up through the forehead. So it's kind of, it's sort of making a tent, almost like a peak, which is kind of weird. Yeah, that is I have to keep that because that's a really good example of not thinking about modeling properly. Okay, let's try the same thing with Relief Maker. So I've left the relief about halfway up just so we get a decent amount of relief to look at. I've left it, I've set the relief type to raised. I've turned these pre-filters off because I'm still not, I haven't really had a look at those yet, so I'm just going to leave them off. I've set the bevel around the edge to tiny. We'll see what that does. Focal length of 82 and a output resolution of 2K, which kind of matches my my ZBrush. My ZBrush canvas obviously is rectangular rather than square, but it's like 2,200 by 1,300, so it's reasonably the same. Right, let's just see what happens. Okay, right, so the first thing we notice is we don't have a crease up the middle. Let's have a look at, and it's not squishing the face in. I mean, it is a little bit, but no, that's more like it. We can see the little bevel around the edge, which is nice. I mean, certainly there's a little bit of chattering, but actually that's, I've got to account for the texture on the edges of the threads there as well, or locks, I should say. What's really useful when, particularly with kind of circulating coin or anything that's quite high, quite low relief or quite high volume production, is having that set edge, to being able to control how much the relief stands off the background, because sometimes you get a model that's got quite a sort of lot of peaks and troughs, and you want to make sure that those troughs don't dip below the surface. So I always like to be able to have a bit of control around the edge, and also with stuff like commemorative and proof coins, it's nice to have a clean line around the edge for polishing. Now, I did discover earlier that when you get the camera in the center, this thing kind of clicks into it's not doing it now. It was clicking into a front-on view, which was really handy, because I can do that in ZBrush with holding down the shift, and it snaps to a particular angle. It was doing it. I can't get it to do it now, so I'm having to do that a bit by eye. So that's something to go on the wish list. Can I have a constraining button, please? But let's flick backwards and forwards. So there's our ZBrush. So we've got a weird crease going up the center, which is not nice, and some unusual stuff going on here. Let's click back to the actual model. So I mean it is quite it's not the best model in the world, is it? But yeah, so it's kind of picking that up. What's Relief Maker doing with that? Relief Maker's kind of smoothed a lot of that out. So those kind of distortions are gone. I mean, those distortions are not ZBrush's fault, because it's kind of in the model. So ZBrush is looking at what's there and just projecting it down. I mean, it's caught the skin texture. What about this one? Yeah, a bit, I'd say. It's really great jumping between two bits of software, trying to do the same thing when they have completely different ways of going and functions to do it. Yeah, it's got some of the face texture, but I fancy that it's a bit subtler on here. It could be the lighting. I mean, ZBrush is... There we go. This is just a bash ZBrush session now, isn't it? So it's got some quite... ZBrush has kind of given us some quite harsh lines here. So it's defined that quite well. I think Relief Maker has softened that off. Let's play with our lighting a bit. Let's get a bit... I mean, let's try and get a... Yeah, so we've got... ZBrush is thinking differently about what it sees in terms of the changes of direction here. It's given us much more of a sort of defined line there, where Relief Maker is making it more subtle. But then that is probably down to the fact that Relief Maker is approaching this in a totally different way. So you've got a definite kind of profile to this that's generally... Yeah. Can I also have a button like in Blender? If you when you're mouse navigating in Blender, if you hit Shift, it slows it down by about 50%, which is really good for lining things up. accurately. Yeah, so look, it's kind of, it's giving us a sort of profile to it, whereas ZBrush is definitely dipping that face in and then pushing the nose back out. That's interesting. Right, so I ran these earlier, and I've taken some grayscales out of it. Let's have a look at the grayscales. So I'm just bringing up Affinity Photo. Bear with me. There we go. Right. Okay. Not now. I don't want to install laptop. Right. Open. Relief Maker Test 2. Right. There we go. Let's have those in. Right. So that's our ZBrush depth map. Yeah, you can see straight away that this is Relief Maker is thinking about this in a totally different way. ZBrush is giving us more of a flat overall, so there's a more of an equal distribution of the high spots across ZBrush's model, but it's doing that weird, let's put that weird crease up the middle, and you can see it's dipping. There's like a circle of shading there where it shows that the whole face is dipping inwards. Relief Maker we've got sort of general tones around the outside, and then it peaks. It peaks quite quickly, which I think gives us it's given a better model. Whether that's going to cause issues when it's run at a lower, let's try it at 10. Okay, let's generate a relief that way. So what do we get at a 10? So we're getting the same. You know, let's export that out as let's bring that out as another height map. Relief Maker 2. Right, yeah, we stuck with a linear, didn't we, because that was working for us. And we'll bring that in. There it is. Okay, let's flick back and forward between those two. Hang on, let's move that across. So that's the first one. That's the second one. I mean, they're in slightly different poses. So I fancy that as we're getting lower in relief, there's a lot less disparity between foreground and background. So the peak is less high, and it's just lifting the whole of the. I mean, everything's compressed, isn't it? But it's still focusing on that central face area, and giving us a big uplift there. Versus ZBrush, which is kind of making more of a flat plate with detail in it, which is kind of interesting. I think Relief Maker is making a nicer model, definitely. It feels smoother. We are getting a bit of that creased, aren't we? ZBrush seems a bit kind of harsh, and it's doing some uncomfortable stuff. Where I think we might see challenges with Relief Maker is in that kind of all or nothing. You know, there's a huge ramp up here from what's going on in the background to this sort of tip of this nose, and whilst that is creating maybe a nicer, it's creating a nicer profile for the model. So if this is struck as a coin, for example, if it's sort of like a shiny coin, or like a bullion or an uncirculated piece or something, that ZBrush model where we've got this sinking in of the face to allow space for the nose to come out, that's going to show up on the model, and that's going to look quite ugly on a shiny coin, because it is going to show that the face is bowed. When when you look at it like that, you can't really see it. But if that was in a shiny coin, I don't want to mess with the materials, you'd see that. You'd see how that kind of looked. I mean, what I might do is just render these up in Blender, so we can see what they look like as kind of finished coins. But that would be quite unpleasant to look at, I think, as a coin itself. I think the Relief Maker one would be much nicer, but I think that sudden lift in the face area may cause kind of problems, especially as we get to smaller kind of height scales. And some of the coins that I make, you might be down to 0.2. I mean, I make coins that are 0.12 in relief, so there isn't a huge amount of room to play with. So if you're taking all of your relief up with that profile, then there's a danger that the sort of detail comes out. I mean, to be fair, the detail is coming out. We're not losing. It's not sort of focusing on this and then pushing everything out into the background. Okay, right. What we're going to do now is I have to hit Control Z. One thing I will say where Relief Maker is, I'm finding it much easier to use, is that it's this kind of, it's not a process. So I can move this thing around, create a relief, export it, and keep moving it around. I'm not having to with ZBrush. It's a sort of finite process. I've got to do it, and if I don't like what I've got, I've got to undo it and do it again. It's a little thing, but it can get quite annoying, especially as you have to sort of flick backwards and forwards. So from a usability point of view, I think Relief Maker is, the fact that it is here to do one thing, I think is really beginning to show, because it's set up to do this one thing. And I can complain about keyboard shortcuts and being able to snap and stuff like that. It's all small beans, but I think as a general approach, it's much easier to do this, because I can move this around and take loads of reliefs off it, and nothing really changes. It's just it's almost like a sort of process function in itself. So I could imagine using this to, let's say, Churchill, for example. I was looking for different angles of Churchill, but there aren't any because he's dead and there's only the photos. So if you had a 3D model of Churchill, you could run it through this, spend an hour if you wanted, picking up loads of different viewpoints of Churchill, and then keeping those as a bank of usable models that you could drop in on other stuff. So it shows having it as a kind of standalone program is really nice. I mean, I like to be not picky, but there used to be. I don't think it's working anymore. But there used to be a plugin for Blender that allowed you to ping your models directly from ZBrush to Blender. I know it does it with Photoshop and it does it with other stuff as well. But there used to be one for Blender. There used to be one for Modo, where you could just, whatever you were doing with your model, you could just jump it across directly into Blender, play with it, jump it back if you wanted to, which was really useful when working, with scales and things, because ZBrush doesn't really give you much in it. It's a sort of analog kind of scaleless setup, so everything is like 0 or 1, and in between there's no sort of finite measurements to it. And when you get into Blender, you want to be looking at finite scales and finite measurements. So I think, Relief Maker is doing the same thing. So height scale in percentages, there's no kind of, I don't really have control over what that is. What is that height scale? 10% of what? So it would be nice. What would be lovely would be able to play around with this and then ping it directly to Blender through an interface, or to be able to specify some sort of scale in this. But there we go. That's That's me. I'm just picky. Right, let's try it with, let's try a 3/4 angle. So let's try and get this in a position. The 3/4, what I'm going to do, because 3/4 is always awkward, especially where you get something like that, where you get this little bit of face on the one side that's really annoying to try and model. Right, let's move to that. So we're gonna, no, where's it gone? Right, there we are. Let's just get that back where we want it. Okay. Nope. So let's have a look what we were to about there, and then let's pull it down a little bit. Right, how does that look? About right. I think it's turned slightly that way, isn't it? That'll do. Right. Okay, let's do ZBrush first. So I brought this model in as an OBJ file. It's the same one in each program, so it's about 7 million polygons in each program. Okay, right, what do we got? We got a crease again, right through the eye. Okay, interesting. I mean, it's there. It's done it with a big. It has this big chunky offset, which is pretty unpleasant. And there you can see the same again, where it's dipping in at the nose and mouth. So it's trying to think about this as a 3D object, thinking, oh well, that bit between the nose and the mouth is lower than the tip of the nose, which in a relief it might not be, because it's the angles, it's the angle of the cuts and the angle of the modeling that makes that depth look like it's depth, and not necessarily actually hacking down into the model. Right, let's try this one and see. So we're keeping all the settings the same. Okay, do you know what? I was going to do it at slightly higher, wasn't I? Let's try that again. I mean, that's quite hard to there. So straight away, what I'm noticing is these pinches that ZBrush is putting in that Relief Maker is not. I mean, the eyeballs are much smoother in Relief Maker. I think I can see there where ZBrush is dipping, and then you've got this kind of hard line where the jaw comes in, which is Relief Maker is kind of doing, but it doesn't feel as pronounced. Let's take a, okay, so let's take a let's call that 3. Linear, we'll stick with linear, and let's do one from ZBrush. And grayscale out. No, I don't want RM, I'm thinking of. Let's call that 3 as well, so we know what it is. Right, okay. Let's have a look at the. Let's get rid of those. We don't need those. Okay, 3, brush 3. Right, let's have a look. So again, yeah, ZBrush, we've got a more even distribution of the relief height, so it's flatter overall, with peaks and troughs within it. Relief Maker has given us this kind of, so it's thinking about the model, it's thinking about what is closest to the viewer, pushing the other stuff back, but it's giving like like a kind of, I don't know how to describe it, like a kind of compositional line through the model where it's putting a sort of 3D profile into it. And that sounds really poncy, doesn't it, say it like that? But it's kind of thinking about this model and thinking, right, okay, so we've got the bits that are closest to the viewer and the bits that are furthest away, and I'm projecting those down, but I'm going to look at the overall structure of the face, and I'm going to put I'm going to push this forward so that there is an underlying shape to the model. ZBrush is kind of going, yeah, here's a model, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to look at the peaks and troughs, and I'm going to push those peaks and troughs into a flat plane. And that's where, I mean, I don't know why it's getting these little creases. There might be a setting here somewhere, but there's and I think it gives, I mean, that actually looks really nice. I mean, to be fair, that actually looks quite good. And I think ZBrush it's all right. I mean, it's, you get it like that, it looks okay, apart from this massive scar. But it's this dip, that is gonna show up on a coin. And the thing with coins is that they are not designed to be viewed from one angle under one set of lighting conditions. They are designed to be viewed, on the move, rolling around in a hand. So I think, as we pull the lighting around here, although we get it's going to highlight different elements, it's going to change the nature of the model as the lighting moves around, and that's kind of part of the course. Relief modelers tend to work with the light in one direction, but then you kind of move it around and you take a look at it from different angles to see what's going right and what's going wrong. That's sort of maintaining a sense of form no matter what I do to it. But when I do the same thing with ZBrush, which is more awkward because I've got to, I think as the light, it's not, put my light off. I mean, it's all right. It feels more angular. It feels more kind of, I think, crude is probably the word I would use. I think that where ZBrush has a strength, it's in this kind of evenness that would be more helpful, certainly in kind of really low relief stuff. If relief is no object, then it doesn't matter, because and there's a lot of that around. A lot of the collectible stuff, they want big kind of bold, almost kind of classical, looks like it's actually a whole head cut in half and stuck down. So there's a lot more room for that. I think this might create an issue for very, very low relief stuff. Let's try it with the low relief. I mean, I did run that, but let's try it at 10 and see what it does. I've got to do that one. Yeah, there we go. So I mean, it's it's there. It's captured everything. I mean, I'd probably want to do a bit more work on that, strengthening some of the very fine detail. I mean, it has picked up everything. What does the ZBrush one do when we start playing with the sizing? Let's push that down a bit. I mean, with a lot of these things, they actually tend to look better. There's actually any light on there? Yeah, there is. I mean, it's, you know, once you start getting down to lower relief, some of these things maybe don't show up as much, and the differences become a bit less obvious. I mean, it's all captured the detail. I think where we run into a kind of hassle then with ZBrush is because it's on this huge plinth, so you have to take account of that, and I probably need to kind of cut that out, slice some of that, or push the whole thing down so it's not on this huge kind of plinth. You can see it's captured all the face and stuff. I think as we push the ZBrush one down, I mean, what we've got there, a little bit, quite a lot of chatter in there, digitizing. Let's have a look at the other one, which we are not getting there at all. I mean, that it feels smoother, and I think there's definitely a case to say that, that you can kind of see this pixelation on the edge, which we're just not seeing on Relief Maker at all. I think it's a much smoother model, and it is obviously doing something very different. Right, let's try one final one. I'm going to do not that I would ever model anything so horrendously foreshortened, but let's try a top down. Right, so see, now I've got to undo all this. It's really annoying. There we go. Right, let's have a think. Now we're going to tip that. We're going to tip that way, and we're going to tip. No, that's stretching it. My bad. Let's have a look. What did I do with this one? I did that, so it's kind of resting in that bit of a cloak like that. All right. Let's move it up into the middle. Right, let's have a look at that against that. Yeah, it's not bad, is it? You get slight differences in the perspective, but that's okay. That's not a problem. We're only having a play. Right, project relief. Let's have a look. Turn that off. Okay, what are you doing now? Right. Okay. First thing that jumps out is there is a lot of pixelation around the edge of that. That is ugly. I'll say that outright. That is really ugly. So that was something that would need working on straight away. What's it doing to the face then? Again, getting a bowl in here, a depth. Right, let's do a grayscale off there. So ZBrush, isn't it? ZBrush. Let's call that ZBrush 4. And we'll do that, and then let's do the same thing with. Oh, hang on. I was going to do it with a slightly higher relief, wasn't I? Let's do that. Okay, right. Let's have a look. So, no chattering. I mean, I'm trying to be as objective as I can, but I think it's fair to say that the transition between planes and kind of areas of modeling is a lot smoother on Relief Maker, a lot smoother. It's capturing it. It feels like ZBrush is. Yeah, see, we get these. ZBrush is is putting all these creases in, and it's obviously the way it's. I mean, they're there because they're on the. I mean, to a certain extent, they're on the model, but I think ZBrush is just the way it's thinking about it. It's just thinking about it in an unusual way, or well, not an unusual way. I just think it's thinking. I don't know what it's thinking. I don't understand. I don't understand how the algorithms work. I can only sort of work on what I see. So let's send that out as well. And then what we're going to do is we'll do one more little test afterwards. Right. Okay. Linear, same as we had before. Let's get rid of these because we don't need these. 4 and number 4. Let's have a look. Right. So what are we on? ZBrush. So yeah, here again, it's flatter. So ZBrush is trying to create the sense of depth while keeping the whole thing flat, and that I think is where it's running into problems. Like I said, it's thinking like a rookie, and it's going, well, I've got this kind of flat plane that I'm working on, and I'm trying to fit everything in to this flat plane, which means that if I want the nose to look like it's sticking out, everything around the nose has got to be cut back down. You can see it here. You can see there is a dip in the bridge of the nose. There is a dip either side of the nose to the cheeks, and the tip of the nose would be the highest point, but not on a full 3D sculpture. They are physical, spaces. The nose sticks up high, and it does cut down into the eye sockets and to the cheeks. But in relief, you're trying to insinuate that without actually cutting the model to pieces. You've got to try and make the light suggest that there is a cavity here. And although you might put some cavity, you would probably have the bridge of the nose and the tip of the nose as a high point and then run this down, but you wouldn't cut it in the way that it's represented on a fully 3D model. You wouldn't think, I'm looking down at the model, so this eye socket is gonna have a massive shelf that leads up to the brow, because that's the way I'm looking at it. That's the perspective of it. Is you've got the edge of the brow, and then it's going to drop suddenly into the eye socket. And drop suddenly either side of the nose, which is what it would do if you were thinking about it in 3 dimensions. But in relief, you're not. You're going to try and suggest that it does that. So in a sense, I think ZBrush has an approach to it that's trying to keep everything on a sort of flat, level plane, which is useful in a sense, but it's not doing it very well, because I think that's what's confusing it, is it's trying to keep everything flat, so it's making cutouts to give a sense of relief when it shouldn't. Here with Relief Maker, we've got this sort of compositional profile where it's thinking about, well, what's the bit that's closest to the viewer, and I'm going to think about that sense of depth, and I'm going to put I'm going to put a profile into the model. It's not about the detail. It's thinking about it's projecting the detail, but it's projecting the detail onto it seems to be thinking about an underlying shape that's more in line with thinking about, well, how is this? What is the sort of the form? The kind of core form of what I'm looking at is this kind of rounded shape that kind of curves off into the distance here, so you can see that quite clearly, that you've got a concentration of the height here, and then everything else kind of curves off, and it sort of disappears off quite subtly towards the edge. There you can see that, so there's a totally different approach to it. Right, what we're going to do, I'm going to get rid of that, and let's let's try actually bringing these in, one of these in as an alpha. Let's bring the 3/4 one in. Let's see what it does when it comes in. Right. Oh, do you know what? This drives me nuts. Let's do it with a pen. Let's get the pen and do it that way. So that, bringing that grayscale from Relief Maker in as a relief, as an alpha matte in ZBrush. I mean, that's really nice. that's nice. I mean, it's losing a bit of detail perhaps. But that's a, you know, that's a workable model. I mean, that's I like that. It's good. Let's try it with the ZBrush one. Of course, we're getting the background of the ZBrush one as well. Let me just have a look. What is kind of interesting, and something I've just learned actually, is that quite often when I bring alphas in, particularly from something that I've projected from 3D, or if I've used a mist passive blender or something, it comes in with a lot of stepping, which I'm not seeing on either of these. So maybe TIFF is my way forward with that. Right, we got. I mean, there's chattering. There's a lot of chatter in here, isn't there? And along here as well, underneath. I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop this video and I'm going to go and set a couple of these up in Blender so we can render them out and have a look and see what they look like with some materials on them, so we can get a sense of them in the same lighting conditions, and see how they translate into coinage.